Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if overpowered Izuku becomes the successor of All Might and got harem with Ochako and Momo, part 2. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Mugen Arashi, link is in the description, also subscribe to our channel and like this video, so let's begin the video. It had been a bit crazy for Izuku ever since the quirk apprehension test, with a lot of people asking him to show off his quirk, as well as him never actually being adept at social situations. Yet through it he was able to gain a few friends, most noticeable being Uraraka, Iida, and Momo. Bakugo had also hung around then, yet he never actually took part in the conversation. Momo started talking to him while using his quirk's creation aspect as a topic. He was actually able to hold a conversation with Momo because of how similar their interests were. He wasn't surprised on how she got a recommendation to enter UA, especially after seeing her quirk in action. He also found that she was the one who had a higher grade than him on the written test. Soon they hung out a lot, after which she was regularly seen with him, Uraraka, and Iida. Now he was waiting for the heroics class to begin. After spending the morning going through the normal class, which was fun since he would compete with Momo to see who was the better student. The door was suddenly flung open and All Might arrived in his Silver Age costume. "I have come through the door, like a normal person." Izuku grinned at his sensei's boisterous entrance, while the rest of the class chattered with excitement as All Might strutted to the front of the room. He turned to them, grinning, and continued. Basic hero training. This class will put you through every possible scenario and forge each and every one of you into a great hero. Today is gonna be battle training. And for this you need to look good, so I have hero costumes. All of which was done in accordance to maximize your quirk's effects. Everyone stood as All Might finished. Once you have changed, come to ground beta. As they all took their costume containers and left to the changing room. Their costumes were based on the designs given by them along with some notes. These are sent by the UA to companies so that they are made of the highest quality materials. As they walked out onto ground beta they saw each other in their hero costume for the first time. Momo had a simplistic costume which showed off a lot of skin. Iida had a very similar costume to that of Ingenium. Ochako had a pink bodysuit which seemed to be designed after a spacesuit. Izuku on the other hand was seen wearing a black body armor, which consisted of a black tight and full-sleeved shirt with silver accents which outlined his muscles, and a metal plate on his collar, and black pants that had 2 black straps on his thighs, and another 2 strapped around his shins separate from each other. He wears black metal-plated shoes, which appear to be attached to his trousers. To top it all he had a white cloak with red flames licking at the end. "Everyone's here. And you truly look like heroes," All Might said. "Now, welcome, my students, to battle training." It seemed as though ground beta was one of the test areas that were used in the entrance exam. Most of the students started to talk amongst themselves, wondering what exercise they would be given. "If I may sir," Iida began, "it appears that this is the same location used for the entrance exam. Will we be performing urban tactics again?" "No, not twice. We'll be taking it 2 steps forward. While most of the villain fights you see on the news are outside, statistically speaking the more serious, as well as tougher fights in our hero community occur indoors. The villains on higher scales act from the shadows in hopes of not being seen on the radar. Now I shall divide you into groups of 2, and then you shall battle against each other, where one group will act as the villains and the other as heroes. The villains have a warhead in one of these floors of the building, and in order for the heroes to win you must either capture the villain or you must seize the warhead, while the villains need to prevent that from happening." This of course was met with a ton of questions from the students. All Might seemed a bit overwhelmed by the questions, but continued. "We shall decide the groups and the roles by lots. Now Group A versus Group D, the A team will be the heroes for this simulation. The test will start in 5 minutes. With that All Might left with the rest of the students following him. "Izuku, we should make a plan," Momo said as she turned to Izuku, who looked to be in deep thought. "Haken is gonna gun for me the moment the simulation starts, so our best tactic is for me to distract him while you take Iida on. I'm sure that I'll be able to stall or even beat Kaken, but how do you think you'll fare against Iida?" "Well, I'd prefer we stick together. From what you have said about your school life, Bakugo would want to have a one-on-one with you. I'll take care of Iida, but make sure not to get hurt, okay? And begin." All Might's voice rang through the test area from the control room. With a nod both Mom and Izuku entered the building. But Iida and Bakugo. "4 eyes. What do you think about Deku?" said Kaken with his back against Iida. "You mean Midoriya-san? Well, he is very friendly, he seems to have extensive knowledge of heroes and their quirks. Well, at first he is a bit awkward, he leads into it after some time, and his quirk is very powerful and versatile." "Is that enough?" replied Iida. "Yay, that sounds like Deku. Alright, stay here, I'm going after him," he stated while having a rather resigned expression on his face. "Wait, Bakugo. We are supposed to work as a team, remember? If we don't, they will overpower us for sure. The pure destructive power of Midoriya's quirk is mind-boggling. Itsuki didn't bother replying, he simply walked out determined to settle his mind on his thoughts on Izuku. But Izuku and Momo. As they both entered the building, Izuku placed his hands against the wall of the building. Momo was confused as to what he was planning. As she reached out to shake him, his body suddenly released a wave of light that seemed to extend everywhere. After 10 seconds Izuku clutched his head, as if in pain. Momo was concerned about him and helped him up. After receiving a thanks from him she asked. What was that about? Okay, not much time to explain, it was a bastardized version of a sonar, the feedback hurt, the weapon and Iida are on the 5th floor, and Bakugo is searching for us, since I saw him on the 3rd floor stairs coming downwards. Izuku felt his headache reside a bit, but it was still present. Momo, the moment me and him start combat I want you to gun for the warhead, be alert, Iida is faster than you, so get your weapons ready before attacking him. Okay, I'll key. Izuku. Izuku turned to see Kaken running towards him with an explosion charging up in his hands. Out of the corner of his eye he saw Momo tensing for a fight. He looked back and saw that Kaken was just a few feet away from him, augmenting his limbs with either. Izuku rushed to intercept Bakugo head-on. Both Momo and Bakugo are clearly surprised by the tactic. Bakugo thrust his arm planning on nailing Izuku in the face. As he released his explosion quirk again, Izuku, as if already knew his move, ducked. Then placed an open palm on his stomach before his energy thrust him away. Not giving him time to recover, Izuku blurred towards Bakugo and took them both to another hallway, leaving Momo a clear shot to the stairs. But Izuku and Bakugo. As both Izuku and Bakugo engaged each other in combat, with Izuku using his knowledge of close combat to keep Bakugo from using his quirk. Finally needing distance, Izuku cut Bakugo's right swing with a massive uppercut. Both of them didn't look too banged up, with Bakugo having just a few bruises, and with Izuku's clothes being a bit singed, and his face having a nasty bruise when Bakugo switched moves, surprising him. Izuku had been trying to subdue Katsuki, but it seemed as though today he was a man on a mission. As they both stood up, with a couple of meters between them, Bakugo's gauntlet suddenly glowed red. Bakugo looked at Izuku, and rather than having a face of anger that Izuku anticipated, it was actually a visage of determination. You know, Izuku, back in school I always thought that the rest of them were extras, that I was undisputed. We used to hang out together, and after a while I started becoming a bit arrogant in my power. I thought everyone would just drag me down. So I challenged each and everyone there, and, as I beat everyone with no sweat, you of all people gained a quirk and knocked me out. You refused all my challenges after that, or someone always got in between. So let's end it here, and now show me that you can actually give me a challenge. But that Bakugo raised his right arm, and a pin much like that which you see on grenades became visible, as he explained that these gauntlets store up the nitroglycerin to let him create a big enough explosion. All Might tried to warn Bakugo from using it, but it was too late. A massive explosion came charging at Izuku from Bakugo's gauntlet. Those in the control room watched in horrid fascination as the explosion bathed Izuku in fire. All Might seemed to be unmoving, and before he could say a word he saw a trace of gold coming from the smoke left behind by the attack, and soon as the smoke subsided, it gave way to see Izuku hand outstretched with a massive shield of energy, reminiscent to that of 5 petals. His arms seemed to buckle from the strain, and he was seen panting as the construct was dispersing. He looked a bit worse for the wear, but none too damaged. You know, Kaken, if you wanted me to prove that I wouldn't drag you down, you could have said so, rather than trying to attack me all the time in school, but, as much as I would love to patch up, I have a test to win. Heaven's Light, Swords Barrage. Multiple sword constructs flickered into creation, and were all pointed towards Bakugo, who had a grin on his face. The swords came close to catching him before he revealed that he was charging another explosion in his left hand. The explosion met the sword tip, and knocked Izuku down from the resulting wall of air. As soon as he sat up he found his sensory field urging him to duck, and not a moment later he found himself mere inches away from Katsuki's gauntlet. Either shot forward from Izuku's frame and clashed with the arm, giving Izuku just a moment to stand. Both of them looked exhausted, Bakugo more than Izuku. It was then Izuku decided to end it. He sent multiple chains of light and spread them through the enclosed space as soon as Bakugo tried to combat them. All the chains suddenly dispersed, and soon he turned to find Izuku had closed the gap with his fist reared back for a haymaker. And so with a resigned sigh he took the blow. Izuku made sure to not use more than 4% of one for all to augment his body, as he had found out that instead of augmenting a single limb with OFA, letting it flow throughout his body gave a better output than his previous assumptions. Izuku let out a tired sigh as he spun the capture tape around Katsuki's. He was wondering what happened to Momo when suddenly the intercom burst to life. Hirotima wins. His radio also beeped signaling Momo wanted to communicate with him. Izuku? Are you there? I heard a large explosion. Izuku gave a small smile before he placated her worries before asking her how she won against Iida. I captured Iida by luring him into a trap by blinding him with smoke. After his movements were sealed with a rope trap, he was in front of the mouth of a cannon. And then I just spun the capture tape around him. Izuku sweat dropped. Wasn't that a bit overkill? Suddenly he thought of his fight with Bakugo and felt stupid for thinking that. Control room. The entire crowd was buzzing with the students chattering about what they witnessed. The girls were talking on how Momo and Izuku used tactics to defeat Group D, while the guys were going on about the fight between Izuku and Bakugo and how Izuku was completely badass when he blocked that grenade attack. This was what Momo and Izuku saw when they entered. Of course Uraraka ran to them and started fussing over them, and their injuries weren't much thanks to Izuku's healing abilities. The rest of class also talked to them, and even Bakugo, who came after visiting Recovery Girl. Although he was a bit moody. All Might got the attention of the class. Now, that was a very interesting match. The hero team showed excellent response to all the hurdles they faced, and even though the villain team was divided, they all performed admirably. Although young Bakugo, I'd recommend that you don't use your gauntlet attacks and training exercises without prior permission, as it could have caused injuries to both the students, and it may also harm those near, as collateral damage. Bakugo, who seemed much more reserved than normal, simply nodded. Now since that is out of the way, let's continue with the simulation. The teams went on one by one. Izuku was talking to everyone about what they saw. He also received compliments about his costume and his moves. The class ended on a high note as they all left with a smile on their face, as All Might said that he was proud of each of them. As school ended, Bakugo came to Izuku, who was with Momo, Uraraka, and Iida. Hey Izuku. Kaken. What is it? Izuku was a bit on guard as he wasn't sure how Kaken was gonna react. Look, you proved that you were strong, so I wanted to let you know that the next time I'll win, I'll be even stronger than last time, and that we'll face each other straight with no tricks, got it? Izuku was stunned. He knew Bakugo long enough to understand that this was his version of friendship. With a smile, Izuku raised his arm out for a fist bump. Sure Kaken. Let's give it our best. Bakugo seemed surprised before he returned the fist bump, smirking as he did so. Unknown to them, they were watched by All Might and Nezu. He's a natural, isn't he, principal? Yes, to connect with Bakugo through fists. I truly believe he will be in the epicenter of everything. The next day. The entire walls around the campus were crowded with reporters trying to get into the campus. News of All Might teaching the new batch of UA had been a major scoop. Currently guarding the entrance was Aizawa and Present Mick. You think they'd give up after some time? Like sheesh, I'd rather fight a horde of villains than this. This of course was from Present Mick. The reporters had been hounding students and teachers alike for the better part of an hour. Until now, when one of the more gutsy reporters tried to enter the UA by force, which in turn activated the defense mechanism of the school. Class 1A. Izuku and the gang were together talking about how they have been spending the day. Uraraka was by Izuku and was recalling how she had once used her quirk to make her bag lighter so she could carry it. EASIER blah blah. Iida was with Bakugo, who had mellowed out, berating him on disrespecting the desks. Momo was on the other side of Izuku and was reading through one of his notebooks. While Izuku himself was content just listening to Uraraka's story while answering Momo's questions. The door opened to reveal their homeroom teacher Aizawa-sensei, who had a rather bored expression on his face. Now then, I'm here to inform you of something very important. I recommend you listen well. The entire class was motionless, knowing the last time Aizawa-sensei threatened them with expulsion. You have to choose a class rep, do it however you want. I need the name after I finish my nap. The classroom sighed in relief, before of course everyone decided that they were the best to class rep, which before it could escalate both Izuku and Iida calmed the class down. After which Iida recommended a vote, which the class agreed to. Passed forward. The vote drawn led to the result of Izuku with 4 votes and Momo with 2 votes. And thus Izuku was led to be the class rep and Momo the vice. Izuku was a bit overwhelmed but calmed himself and promised the class that he would do his best. During lunch they all sat together where they found that Iida was the younger brother of the pro-hero Ingenium. Before anyone could comment, the UA security system ordered an evacuation due to a security breach. The response was immediate, but pandemonium began to wreak across the cafeteria. Izuku knew that he needed to do something. Calling his aura, he heightened his abilities to the max, causing his body to leak energy to the surroundings. This caused most of the students to calm down due to the passive effect of his energy on allies. Momo created a loudspeaker to catch everyone's attention and spoke. Please remain calm, we must first assess the threat before we do anything. Please maintain an orderly fashion. Izuku, still keeping his quirk active, created a platform for him and Momo to rise above the crowd, where they saw the supposed threat was nothing more than some rogue reporters who got in. This of course got everyone to settle down and return to the cafeteria, a bit on guard, but overall calm. Izuku, seeing everyone going back, deactivated his quirk and sighed. He then got compliments from his fellow students. But thinking Midoriya, it's a good thing we chose you and Momo as our reps, otherwise we would have looked like headless chickens on TV. Day of USJ class. They assembled in class where Aizawa had told them. For today's basic hero training, All Might, myself and another hero will supervise. We will be preparing you for disaster relief, from fires to floods. Aizawa displayed a long card printed with the training topic. It's rescue training. The class was excited at the change of pace. I'm not finished yet, Aizawa said. He pressed a button and the wall opened, revealing their packaged costumes. You all have the option to wear your uniform or your workout clothes. Some of you have uniforms not suitable for today's training, but it's not my decision. The facility we'll be at is off campus, so we'll take a bus there. I'll take questions when we arrive. Class 1 strolled out to the bus bay, all dressed in their costumes. Izuku was with Momo trying to get everyone's attention so that they could board the bus. Line up, guys. After a few attempts, the class was soon in an orderly line and boarded the bus. He followed, near the back, and sat on the sideways seats near the front, with Momo and Iida on each side, and Uraraka, Tsuyu, and Bakugo on the other. The bus turned on and departed UA for the off-campus complex for rescue training. Midoriya, why is it that when you say the names of your moves they get stronger than normal, and you seem to have got drained too? Tsuyu said after a few minutes. Oh, that's a pretty good question, Asui-san. Call me Tsuyu, she responded. Yeah, come to think about it, when we saw the tapes from battle training, where your sword things, well, they seemed faster and more solid-like. Kirishima grinned and continued. And your quirk is awesome. You can do a lot with that, unlike my hardening quirk. His arm stretched out and soft skin turned into a hard crystalline material. It's great for fighting, but it doesn't look terribly cool. Izuku thought he should say something. Your hardening quirk is pretty cool, Kirishima. It's definitely a good quirk for going pro. You really think so, Midoriya? Kirishima asked. Having a strong quirk isn't all it takes to be a pro. Don't forget that you need to be popular too. Yeah, I mean, your hardening quirk makes it better than a lot of people close combat wise, and you're pretty sturdy for damage too. Mine is a bit different. The words I say sorta unlock something in my quirk. It's like I'm shaping my quirk to a concept. I can do a lot more, but my quirk usually causes a lot of AoE damage, and I haven't fully mastered them. Although it's pretty strong and cool, Todoroki and Bakugo are pretty much above us. Izuku blushed at the praise. Yeah, but Bakugo is unhinged. He'll never be popular, Tsuyu said, leaping right off of Kirishima's statement. Bitsuki leapt to his feet, shouting, what did you say, frog girl? Tsuyu pointed at his reaction, as if it proved her point. You know, Bakugo, Denki began. It's pretty sad that barely 2 weeks in, and we all know that your personality is worse than a backed up sword. Lol, I love this sentence from the anime. Stop it, all of you, we're here, Aizawa called back, as the bus stopped. They followed him out of the bus and into the massive complex they were parked in front of. Inside were 6 zones, each with their own hazards. The class looked around the building in awe. Looks like there are zones for floods, landslides, conflagrations, earthquakes, and more. Exactly, their mystery teacher said, joining Class 1A. I've been waiting for you guys. This facility is home to nearly every disaster and accident you can imagine. I built it myself, and I call it the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. Or for short USJ. Their mystery teacher was stocky, wearing a white space suit with a black dome and yellow boots. Or Universal Studios Japan, everyone thought. You're the space hero, 13, Izuku said, as he recognized the pro hero from TV. Onto his side, Uraraka did a dance at meeting her, one of her favorite heroes. Hey 13, Aizawa said. Where's All Might? I thought he was meeting us here. About that, Eraserhead. It seems he overworked himself today during his morning commute. 13 held up 3 fingers, and Izuku understood what she meant. Izuku felt guilty that he hadn't been of any use to All Might since he inherited One for All. It was illogical, but he couldn't help it. That man is the height of irresponsibility, Aizawa complained. He turned to his students, saying, if he isn't here, then he isn't. Let's get started. Before we do so, 13 cut in, there are some things I want to talk about before we start. As many of you know, my quirk is called Black Hole. It can consume and destroy anything. While I use it to save people in disasters, it can easily kill. I can guess there are some here that have similar abilities, dangerous and even lethal. In our super-powered society, the usage of quirks is heavily restricted, monitored, and regulated. While it appears stable, all it takes is one mistake with a powerful quirk for many people to die, even if you plan to use it for good reasons. I've been told a little about your previous classwork using quirks. Aizawa's test was meant to draw out your potential. All Might's battle training showed you how your quirks can threaten others. Today, however, you will learn how to use them to save lives. Your powers are not meant to harm others, and I hope that when you leave today, you will understand what it means to help people. Thank you for listening. As they applauded 13, Aizawa stepped forward. Now let's begin. He drifted off, looking down at the plaza between the different zones. But then a black and purple mist swirled, expanding, until a hand grabbed the side of the forming hole, and a head popped through. With shaggy pale blue hair, red eyes, and a white hand covering his face. Huddle up and don't move. Aizawa shouted back at them. He ignored his students' confusion. 13, protect the students. At this point, dozens of villains were pouring through a giant black tier in the USJ. What's going on? Is this a part of the exercise? Kirishima asked. Not at all, Aizawa said, pulling on his goggles. Those are villains. The figure emerged from the mist, formed from the same black and purple wisps. 13, an Eraserhead. Where is All Might? All Might is supposed to be here. So that was you, scum. That day the press somehow got on campus. The man with the hand stuck to his face stepped forward. Well, where is he? We've brought a lot of people so we could play together. All Might, the symbol of peace. Where is he here? His attention turned to the student standing behind Aizawa. I wonder if some dead kids will bring him here. Izuku was piecing everything together. They thought All Might was going to be here, so why would they want to face him? Suddenly it crashed into him where they were here to kill him. Izuku activated his quirk on instinct. He knew that he needed to keep everyone safe here. He was the reason All Might couldn't make it, so he had to step up. This place is far from campus, and we're the only ones here, Shadow said. Without the sensors activating, nobody at UA knows about what's happening here. They're here to kill All Might, Izuku said, causing the rest of the students to pale. As the final villain exited the black-purple mist, it appeared to be nothing more than a brute. Its brain was exposed, it was bulky, and seemed to incapable of rational thought, but somehow Izuku's very being wanted to be as far away from it as possible. His body felt primal fear staring at them. He turned to the rest of the class. He knew that it was useless unless they escaped. That possibility was out the window as he felt the lockdown procedures activating. He felt one for all and either within him. Almost immediately he had made a choice. 13. Aizawa shouted over any potential panic. Evacuate the facility and try making contact with the school. One of the villains must be jamming the sensors and our communications. There's a good chance one of their electric types is the cause. Haminari. Try to use your signal to contact the UA. Denki nodded. Sensei, you can't mean to fight them all alone, Izuku said. You can't erase all of their quirks. Your fighting style is much better suited towards erasure and a quick disabling move. Fighting so many won't. No good hero is a one-trick pony, Midoriya, Aizawa said calmly, as ever. Izuku stared at his sensei. He knew that even with the years of experience and training under his sensei's belt, this fight wouldn't be one he could shrug off. Finally he decided to trust in his sensei, but a small request first. Sensei, could you please give me a hand? Aizawa looked perplexed, but considering the situation he needed to buy them time, and Izuku can't be stubborn now without good reason. He raised his arm. Izuku aimed his arm at him, and suddenly Aizawa felt like he was in his prime, all his exhaustion from the night patrols leaving him. He stared at Izuku, astonishment clearly seen on his face. Seeing his face, Izuku simply said. Warrior's blessing, my quirk is primarily suited for supplementary type situations like this, and I thought you would like the power up. Aizawa simply chuckled, his scarf releasing its tight bonds around his shoulders. 13. Protect my students. And Izuku, you never cease to surprise me with that. He flicked his scarf out and leapt down the staircase. While Izuku wanted to help Aizawa take down the multitude of villains, he followed 13 and the others towards the exit. They were only a dozen meters from the doors when the black mist appeared before them. Terrible yellow eyes glowered from the black and purple fog. I'm sorry, but I cannot allow you to leave, it said, shocking them. We are the League of Villains. Forgive our intrusion, but we've come here to the UA High to kill All Might, the symbol of peace. Defied an entire league dedicated to killing All Might. This was not how today was supposed to go. Izuku had his quirk passively activated, ready to lash out at a moment's notice. We were under the impression that All Might would be here today, the smoke villain continued. It appears the schedule was revised. That doesn't matter. My role remains unchanged. While 13 prepared his quirk, Kitsuki and Kirishima took the initiative and jumped past the pro hero to engage the villain. They both threw a devastating punch, hitting the villain simultaneously. You seriously thought we'd stay still until you finished your monologue? Kirishima grinned as he brandished his arm. The mist villain reformed, revealing a long metal collar and a simple black and white suit beneath the smoke his body formed. That was close. Though you may be a student, you are still the best of the best. 13 shouted, get back you two. The villain expanded thick dark fog began to overtake the young heroes. I'll send you all with my comrades, the villain said, seeing that he possessed a warping quirk he saw some of his classmates being warped away. Izuku started his counterattack. Battle arts, exorcism. The blast of concentrated ether exploded from Izuku's body, deterring the expanding most from coming closer. Shoto, seeing his chance, reacted by sending ice spears as the villain. Retreating backwards, this gave the students breathing space. 13 seizing the opportunity told Iida, who he noticed was a relative to Ingenium, to run and get backup. Before Iida could deny the plan, Izuku laid a hand on his shoulder. Looking at his friend's face, he saw nothing but trust in them. With a nod, Iida activated his quirk. You must be stupid to talk about your strategy in front of the enemy. With it he expanded again, trying to catch all of the students again, but 13 activated his quirk, immobilizing and drawing the villain in towards his quirk. Iida, seeing the chance, ran towards the door. Well, you may have a very strong quirk, you are a rescue hero, which means you lack battle instincts. Before anyone could move, a warp gate opened behind 13, which caused damage to his entire back. Almost immediately the villain flew towards Iida, who was already near the door trying to pry it open. Just as he was about to reach Iida, an ice wall blocked his path, and the moment he stopped he was face to face with the Bakugo, who immediately aimed an explosion towards the villain's visible armor. Knowing that he couldn't risk getting caught with a blow, he warped himself to the air. And almost immediately he was assaulted with golden swords that seemed to come in from all directions. As he saw from the corner of his eye, he saw the door was forced open and his captive had escaped. He was broken from his thoughts when he was locked together with chains of light and thrown towards the forested area. But Izuku let out a breath of relief. Well, it wasn't a great victory, it provided him time to group up with his classmates and hopefully heal 13. Izuku looked around and saw that he had been able to save Uraraka, Shoto, Momo, Bakugo, Mineta, Mina, and Tsuyu. His mind quickly flew through all the different combat possibilities, with each having a rather low success rate. He cursed himself for being a reason as to why Toshinori-sensei was incapacitated. He quickly broke his train of thought and focused on healing 13 as much as he could. Prayer of healing. Which admittedly wasn't a lot. He saw everyone group besides him. It was Momo who broke the silence. How is he, Izuku? Can you heal him? Unfortunately, this is beyond what I can do. He is out of the woods, but he'll be unconscious until he can get proper treatment. Izuku went to his knees at how much energy he had used. This caused his friends to worry. It was Momo who helped him up. Shoto was the next to speak. What's our plan now? We will have to step up to tackle the villains before they get the best of us. I believe that you should make a plan, seeing as among all of us here, you seem to have a better tactical knowledge with a better implementation than us. If this was another time, he would have stuttered and become a nervous wreck at the praise from anyone. Now though, he only nodded before he laid down the best idea he had. Among all of here, I believe we should go for a split where one of us guards 13 while 3 of us rescue or group up with the others. And the rest of us can be of use and help lighten the workload of Aizawa-sensei and incapacitate the villains until Iida is back. Mineta, who had been on the edge, suddenly broke down. How can we possibly survive? You said that they might be able to kill All Might. We have to run Midoriya. Bakugo of course didn't like that and was about to roughen Mineta before Izuku's passive ability reached him, and Izuku spoke. If there's a chance that they can beat All Might, then we have to do our jobs. We have to fight and we will win. If we don't, how can we call ourselves heroes in training? His thoughts drifted back to memories, primarily his childhood watching All Might and their first training together. You can be a hero. Izuku clenched his fists and turned to everyone who had determination etched onto their faces. Momo, you'll have to guard 13. With your quirk it should be easy. Mineta, Tsuyu, Uraraka, gather everyone and get them to a safe place, anywhere that's not compromised. Bakugo, Shoto, we'll have to be the ones mowing down the villain horde, seeing as our quirks make us most battle-oriented. I'll play as support for first contact. Bakugo, you'll be the tip of the spear. Shoto, I'm assuming that you're more proficient in your ice quirk than your fire side. To which he received a delayed nod. Okay, provide Bakugo cover fire, after which we'll join him in the front lines for any opposition. Receiving nothing but nods from each of them, they separated, each having their communications activated. The assault team started decimating the horde of villains close to their sensei with light spears and swords, icicle spears, and explosions. But Aizawa a few minutes earlier. As soon as he had made contact with the villain wave, he knew that this wasn't gonna end well. Even if he somehow defeated the entire horde of villains, the main head was the one with hands attached to all parts of his body, who was flanked by a giant with his brains exposed. Whatever his student had done to him seriously gave him an edge over everyone, but then he was worried about the side effects to this much power. He was erasing quirks left and right, while they lacked in quality. The number of villains was meant to make him get tired rather quickly, but it seemed much slower than in comparison. His battle instinct suddenly screamed at him to move from his position, which he of course paid heed to, as not even a moment later, he saw a fist making contact with the ground which he was standing on not a second later. The bird brain-like villain seemed to possess a high level of speed and strength comparable to All Might. They turned to him again and attempted to hit him again, but Aizawa seemed to dodge them by an inch or so. Eraserhead, you're so cool. To be able to dodge Namu's hits even if barely, I hate it when heroes live up to their hype. Aizawa on the other hand noticed that the only reason he was actually able to dodge the blows was because he wasn't tired much and also due to the fact that Warrior's Blessing was still active. Knowing he couldn't keep dodging forever, especially since the rest of the villains were surrounding them, he quickly jumped back farther and used his scarf to catch a villain by surprise and threw it at the giant, granting him a few more seconds. He saw from the corner of his eye that the mist villain had returned and seemed to be in a bit of pain as he saw numerous scratches on his armor. The Namu seemed to stop movement as well, suddenly returning to their side. Seeing his chance, he attempted to attack the villain but was thwarted by the rest of the goons. Gurujiri, let's leave behind some dead kids to tarnish the symbol of peace's pride. And just when he was about to activate his quirk, Eraserhead erased it while simultaneously using his capture tape on one of the goons. Leave the children out of this. Eraserhead bellowed. Ah, so the famed hero complex makes an appearance to tell you what. I let you in on a secret. Meet the anti-symbol of peace, the bio-engineered Namu. Made to annihilate All Might. If you can fight through all these waves, you'll fight the boss, get it? The moment he said those words, all the villains on the front ran towards Aizawa, who while not exhausted wasn't at the top of his game. He ran straight towards a villain who seemed to have a quirk that made him look like a gecko, while he erased the quirk of a villain who was trying to get a pot shot at him. He spun around and kicked the gecko in the face and went into the air and used his scarf to bind another villain and threw him towards a group of shooters. Aizawa was a whirlwind of mayhem, showing the villains what happens when a pro goes serious, but then the inevitable happened. He slipped up, overextending a step caused him to miscalculate on where his scarf would go. This gave a villain who seemed to possess a flamethrower quirk to shoot at him. Aizawa knew the only way was to take it head on and hope he survived, so he closed his eyes, grit his teeth, and braced for the pain, except it never came. Instead he heard a familiar voice scream. Die. Followed by a very familiar explosion. Opening his eyes, he saw Bakugo with his fist buried inside the stomach of the villain. Then he saw that the entire wave was being frozen, while a dozen or so energy blasts hit the remaining stragglers. Hey sensei, nap time is over. We got to smash some faces in. Aizawa turned to see Bakugo standing in front of him and knocked out villains with his quirk. Why are you here? You were supposed to escape with 13 and bring help. The mist idiot shut off that chance when he injured 13, seeing his teacher's face go grim. 13 is out of the woods thanks to Izuku, but we were only able to get 4 Eyes out and he's using his quirk to get to UA. Wait, where is Midoriya then? He's playing support and picking off stragglers. Todoroki was providing cover fire. It's been 5 mins, so they'll be coming down for close combat right about. Just then a villain flew above their heads and the entire left squadron was encased in ice. Now. Izuku landed in front of Bakugo, his white cloak fluttering behind him, and then Todoroki walked up towards them, creating an ice wall which separated them from the villains. Izuku further strengthened it by creating a wall of light inside. Sensei, are you alright? Can you fight? Don't worry about me, I'm not a pro for nothing. What happened to the rest of the class? We've been separated by the villain with a warping quirk. We've sent help. They'll regroup to a safe location. And what about you 3? I honestly expected better from you Midoriya, to be prepared to throw away your life along with theirs so easily, and that too for no reason. The 3 of them gave Aizawa a hard stare which was returned with an even more vicious one. Todoroki sighed and said. We came of our own free will sensei, Midoriya is the one who made the plan, that is all. He turned to Izuku, who looked to the ground before he spoke. We are heroes before we are students, sensei, and we can't just let you risk your life, huh? Aizawa stared at the 3 of them before sighing. We are gonna have a talk once this is over. Now let's. The sudden crash at the ice wall which caused the entire structure to collapse revealed the Namu with a fist outstretched. Todoroki's eyes widened. The wall was meant to give them more time than that. Namu raised his arm to destroy their last line of defense, which was the shield. Aizawa's eyes glowed as he erased the villain's quirk, but was met with surprise when the villain cracked the shield without even slowing down. The force threw all of them a few yards back and they crashed into the trees. The moment they regained their senses they saw the fronts converging on their location. Todoroki and Izuku raised their arms and fired blasts of ice and energy respectively, incapacitating the villains. "Sensei, why couldn't you erase that villain's quirk? My shield wouldn't break even to one of Bakugo's explosions. Yet that thing was able to shatter it like it was made of paper." Aizawa shot his scarf to one of the grunts who tried circling around them. "No, I'm sure I erased a quirk. Either he is physically as strong as All Might or he has multiple quirks. These guys keep on coming, Todoroki. Izuku. Blow him away. Bakugo, is your grenade shot ready yet? If it is, shoot it at the Namu on my mark." Todoroki slammed his foot on the ground, causing ice to form all the way to the back. Izuku raised both his hands and shouted out. "Battle Arts, Holy Light." The ball of energy shot from his hands towards the villains and exploded at the center of their formation, which caused all of them to drop unconscious. Aizawa, seeing a chance, ran towards the supposed ringleader and while erasing the Black Mist's quirk. The moment he did so he was intercepted by Namu, a fist smashed to his right side, blowing him towards the left side of the ringleader. "Ah, you really thought that you could outrun Namu? He is faster, stronger, and better than All Might." Aizawa smiled through the pain. "No, it was just so that I could keep you distracted and erase that warping quirk of yours, Bakugo now." Bakugo suddenly emerged from behind Namu, his gauntlet aimed directly at Namu, who was in the path of both the other two villains. "Take this, you freak." An explosion struck true as Bakugo flew back from the recoil. Aizawa was brought to their side by Izuku's light rope and was already working on healing him. They waited with bated breath. As the dust cloud settled, they saw Namu with his entire left side gone. The ringleader stared at Bakugo before laughing. "That's a pretty powerful quirk you have, but Namu has a special ability. You wanna know what it is?" Their eyes drifted to Namu, whose right side was regenerating at an amazing speed. Izuku noticed that it was faster than his regeneration as well. The few remaining villains grouped up with Namu in the back. The leader turned to Aizawa, who was partially healed, and spoke. "Final round, let's go, hero." But that they charged, Aizawa jumped over majority of the villains and directly attacked the leader. Todoroki on the other hand froze any villain within proximity. Bakugo struck any of those that came close to their guards. Izuku stared at the fight in front of him. He knew that couldn't keep it up for long, so he decided to tip the scales. Heaven's light, prayer of salvation. Izuku felt his reserves go down to half, yet it was worth the cost. As his allies felt the spell take effect, Todoroki gave Izuku a look of respect. He felt all of his attacks become 2x as fast and strong. The horde of villains were soon dwindling in number. Bakugo was like a fish in water, causing havoc and destruction in the midst of the villains. He saw the look of surprise in the ringleader's face along with the mist villain, but it was then he noticed the Goliath was missing. Aizawa realized the same thing, but due to diverting his concentration, his opponent scored a hit, causing him to rocket towards the other side to where Todoroki caught him. Even though Izuku's magic tried to heal him, it was of no use, as Aizawa was losing consciousness and a lot of blood. Izuku could see that he was barely hanging on. Get out of here, yo, you guys can't take them on alone." Izuku ignored everything else and poured, as much as either he could, into his next spell. Heaven's light, wide art of healing. Desperate prayer. The blinding light erupted from his hands to Aizawa, encasing him in magic, slowly healing him. Though he lost consciousness, he was now away from death's door. Izuku on the other hand, felt his magic reserves drop to near zero. "Huh, it seems you have a healer in your party, and it seems he is pretty high level. Good, I wouldn't like this to end so soon, especially since Kurogiri took so much time rounding up the kids." Izuku and Todoroki's eyes widened, while Bakugo's narrowed. And, as soon as he finished saying those words, a warp gate opened to the right of all of them, and out came all of their classmates. Most were unconscious, and they looked as though they had fought back. Then he saw Momo and Uraraka come out with a partially healed 13. It seemed as though they were the most injured. Momo and Uraraka must have put up an even more violent fight, seeing as they looked to have the most injuries save for 13. Izuku had to restrain himself from rushing over to them. Kurogiri appeared behind the villain leader. His armor was broken in a few places and his eyes glowing with irritation. "Some of these kids should know when to give up. Those little twerps were putting up such a fight. Shiragaraki, why are we wasting time? Just kill them with your disintegration and be done with it. If the pros get here, we won't be able to escape without casualties." "You worry too much, Kurogiri. Remember that we've set enough distractions around the city in case something like this happens." Sensei was right in doing so too. "I've found an interesting group of enemy players." Izuku knew that in this situation it was next to hopeless. Their teachers were out of commission, their friends held hostage, and both Todoroki and Kaken along with himself were on their last legs. He watched the two villains interact with each other. He could do nothing, as his exhaustion was keeping him from moving. Namu, kill those boys, with a healer out of commission it should be easy enough for you, and make sure it's slow and painful. A shrill sound escaped the mouth of the beast as it slowly walked towards the three of them, Izuku's body filled with dread. There was no way that they could win, even distractions wouldn't work on it, seeing if it is comparable to All Might, then it could crush them all in a single blow. Todoroki did not seem to share Izuku's idea though, as a large amount of ice rushed towards Namu, who dodged back and continued evading as the ice followed him. Izuku, it would be best for you to recover while we deal with the villain. Take Aizawa-sensei towards the rest of them. I'll provide cover for you. Bakugo makes sure Hirichi is there. Bakugo scowled before giving a reluctant nod. Izuku carried him towards the rest of the class who were slowly waking up. Todoroki summoned 3 walls of ice to cover them from the enemy, although he was worried at how long he could hold out until the villain decided to get serious. As Izuku reached the class, he laid Aizawa near 13 and turned to Uraraka and Momo. They stared at him. Fear clear in their eyes, Izuku couldn't blame them. The villains had thought about this attack very clearly. The distractions must be simultaneous attacks on the city. Izuku knew that there was nothing they could do, yet, as he saw Todoroki and Kaken give it their all against the remaining villains, he couldn't help but feel lacking. They were giving it their all to keep them safe while he was here licking his wounds. While he knew that he couldn't do anything, especially after using the last of his energy, except Izuku wouldn't take a backseat. He looked to the rest of those awake and gave a smile much like the ones All Might would give. It's gonna be alright. And with that, Izuku turned and stared at the villains, and then he channeled one for all to every part of his body. He could feel his body protest, he could feel it tearing itself apart. He could feel the undiluted power flowing within. This was what All Might had entrusted him. This was hope. And then he disappeared. Not a moment later, a bunch of villains were sent flying away. Bakugo turned to the direction they came from and saw Izuku, fist outstretched. Todoroki, freeze the entire place now. Kaken aimed the grenade at the big and ugly. Both nodded. Another wave of ice covered the entire ground the villains were standing on. Bakugo took off the second pin and the shot went exploding towards the beast. Izuku went and aimed his fist directly at Kurogiri, who had been trying to warp away the explosion with no success. The bones in Izuku's body were strained at the backlash of the punch, yet they held on. He could feel his control slipping. After each movement he could feel more of Ofa leaking into his body. But before the dust settled down, he heard a scream. A very familiar voice screamed out in pain. Izuku snapped his head and saw Bakugo on the floor unconscious and Todoroki trying to fend off the beast from finishing off the job. Izuku rushed towards them and channeled one for all to his fist and threw his entire weight onto the punch. Meteor smash. The punch struck true, but the beast didn't fly away, nor did it even flinch. Izuku stared at the monster in front of him. The beast raised his arm, and before he knew it, Izuku's body had already moved to try and protect Todoroki. The force behind the hit had sent them flying away, and they crashed into the fountain. Todoroki forced his body to move, and he could feel the anger bubbling within him. He had seen that in the last moment that Izuku had protected him. He saw that even in Izuku's condition he was still conscious, that was forcing his body. Todoroki laid Izuku down and said, "Don't worry, Midoriya, I'll protect them, as you did for me. Even if it costs me everything." Izuku's eyes followed Todoroki, his mouth trying to choke out words, almost as if to stop him. It was futile before he saw Todoroki walking towards his classmates, the ice on his body slowly evaporating before a small flame lighted on his left. "That was very impressive, hitting Namu the way you did, and with a smash too. You must be a fan of All Might. Well then, playtime is over. Namu, kill the pros." Shiragaraki shouted out. The beast said nothing and simply started walking towards Aizawa and 13. Izuku's classmates started in fear, but then Todoroki stood in his path, after which Momo ran in front of everyone and stood their hands outstretched as if to shield the teachers. Uraraka did the same, and slowly everyone did. That was halfway through the distance between them before Shiragaraki halted him. Don't you know you'll be killed trying to stop Namu? Do you want to die that eagerly? Fine, then Namu. Destroy them." The beast let out a roar and charged. Izuku started in despair, forcing himself to move. He whispered, forcing his mangled body to work. Stop, he croaked out, yet it fell on deaf ears. He had to fight. The twitch of his arm. "For my sensei." The ether flowed out from his being, its color darkening. "For my friends." He then turned to his classmates, then his eyes focused on the tears both Momo and Uraraka were shedding. Then something broke inside of him. And then, the mental locks on his power broke. The entire building was flooded with a golden light. Everyone turned to where the light was originating. There they saw Izuku, his body standing completely enveloped in gold with red lightning-like accents throughout his body. His eyes shifted from their normal green to an otherworldly gold. "Enkidu." Spike chains of light coming from all directions caught the running beast and bound him to the ground a few feet away from the students. Power was oozing from his being. Shiragaraki looked in fear and started scratching his neck in a panicked manner. "What is that? You cheater." Izuku ignored the villain screeching and instead he walked towards his classmate's palm outstretched, while some of the students tensed. Momo and Uraraka stood in awe and complete trust. Heaven's blessing, divine barrier of gods. They were encased in a massive barrier about as thick as UA's walls. Izuku stared at the bound villain who had broken out of some chains, quickly summoning 2 ropes of light. He brought Todoroki and Bakugo inside the barrier, before raising his arm at the villain. Battle arts, downpour of heavenly swords. They outshone the light of the long-distant suns, they gleamed in its darkness, swords floated in the sky above them, held up by invisible hands. And then he let his arm descend, and coming down with it, the swords all onto one target. The scream tore from the beast as it was assaulted without restraint. The rest of the sword struck the villains in the legs, whereas Shiragaraki and Kurogiri continued dodging the numerous blades. Izuku channeled energy into the palm of his hand. Battle arts, holy wrath. Then the palm of his hand shining like a second sun shot towards the villain, engulfing it completely in a holy aura, and once it died down they saw the villain's healing almost completely stopped. It lost half of his left arm and all of its right arm. Izuku stared at the villain, then he clenched his hand. "I shall become the embodiment of all that is good in the eternal world. I shall become the sword and shield of humanity." The students felt the words reverberate through them like the ringing of a bell. Those words felt heavy, magical. So much so that everyone awoke to the scene of Izuku, channeling all of his power into his fist, which shone with the intensity of 1,000 suns. And then he flickered to the beast and finished. "Or God strike." There was a violent implosion. The light shone brighter than ever before. With the entirety of his power forged into a single punch, he tore Namu right in the chest with a devastating uppercut, which sent the black monstrosity flying, hitting the ceiling which it tore through like paper, and beyond the USJ. Shiragaraki stared at the figure of Izuku who simply stood there, his body no longer glowing. It was clear that he was unconscious, yet he refused to fall down. This monster had beaten Namu. Without any rational thought he ran towards him. He was intercepted by a spear of ice, followed by even more ice constructs. He saw that the Son of Endeavor stood in front of Izuku, while the rest followed suit. He growled at them before he heard the main doors smashed apart. The tall figure, muscular and blonde, emerged from the ensuing cloud of dust, and then a gunshot tore through the USJ. The bullet hit Shigaraki's hand. The pro heroes stood, a bit roughed up, and all of them had rage in their visages. The most fear-inducing was All Might, staring at the form of Izuku in his classmate's arms unmoving. Then he stared at the villains, but before he could even move, Kurogiri warped himself in front of the injured Shiragaraki and warped away their plan, a failure, and their weapon lost. As the pros watched the leaders of the invasion warped away, they grit their teeth in frustration. They looked around the USJ and found it to be much like a battlefield. Villains decorated the floor, deep trenches left behind by blasts, ice structures were spotted in different places. But what caught their eyes was the hole on the roof, which meant that the thing hurtling away when they came here broke through the roof of the USJ, which was thick enough to withstand a small bomb dropping on it. They divided themselves into groups and rushed to the kids to see if any were injured. A burst of wind alerted them that All Might was now near his students, along with the recovery girl. The scene All Might reached was one filled with dread. Izuku had his head on Uraraka's lap, and Momo was trying and failing to wake him up. All of the kids had tears in their eyes, while Aizawa looked on in a mix of pride and horror. The recovery girl walked forward, the students parted to give her space, each of them pleading with her to help. She stopped in front of Izuku where the girls with tears in their eyes led Izuku's head softly onto a pillow Momo had created. As she looked at Izuku's form she assessed the damage. His entire hero suit was barely hanging together, the cloak was reduced to a few pieces of cloth stuck to his left shoulder, the body armor was reduced to just covering a bit of his chest. As for injuries, his right arm was broken, entire body seemed to be damaged from the inside, which meant he channeled a staggering of his full power without any restraint through his entire body. And then it seemed as though his skin was burnt. Actually, now that she thought about it, it seemed as though he completely depleted himself for any energy, which meant his healing factor was completely negated. Recovery girl knew what she had to do. She turned to the students and asked, "Well, I don't know what he's done to himself. I can heal him up, but he lacks any energy or stamina inside him. My quirk would kill him in this condition. Now I ask that one of you volunteer to become a battery for me to heal Izuku. There will be a risk of overdoing it, so please choose wisely." Whatever she expected, it certainly wasn't all the kids jumping to offer what little energy had to help save Izuku. She smiled before telling them to put a hand on her shoulder and do the same until the end. Momo and Uraraka shot both of recovery girl's shoulders and the rest rushed over and did the same on theirs. Recovery Girl channeled the combined energy towards Izuku and saw that he became healed, his bones mended back, the skin flaked up and fell off, revealing new pinkish skin, and then she diverted the energy to his entire body, letting it soak up within him, causing his quirk to latch on and activate so as to help Izuku. This went on until Izuku simply looked asleep and not like a dead man. Recovery Girl cut off the connection and told the kids they could let go, which they did, although some of them immediately went to their knees, as it must have taken a lot out of them. Time skip 6 days later. Toshinori stared at the form of Izuku. While he was healed physically, it seemed as though it would take some time for him to wake up. All the other kids only had some cuts and bruises, the only other threatening injury was 13, and he too would soon recover, as it seemed Izuku had done some healing immediately after 13 was struck. Along with Aizawa and Bakugo. Aizawa had a checkup and found that he was mostly alright other than some bruising in his ribs, which of course he refused to believe, as he was struck by the Namu and was almost sure his entire chest collapsed. A fight almost broke off until the partly injured Todoroki explained on how Izuku used his remaining energy to heal him. This of course made both the doctors and the heroes wide-eyed, as seeing that even Recovery Girl would need the stamina of at least 20 people to get Aizawa healed. Before anyone could ridicule Todoroki's claims, Recovery Girl herself stated that Izuku was indeed capable of such feats, as his work in the hospital when he was a kid testified to those claims. Aizawa didn't say a word after that and just simply went out, visiting every 6 hours or so to check up on Izuku. It was the first time Toshinori had seen Aizawa anything like this. Todoroki and Bakugo were fine other than a few broken bones which were fixed by Recovery Girl. They did express concern over Izuku in their own way, which was basically inquiring where he was and asked to be notified when he was awake. His mom was informed of what happened and she came rushing to the hospital, frantic to see her son. Those first wails had haunted Toshinori ever since. He had told me that Izuku did what had to because of his absence during their class. Yet, to his surprise, Inko had said that Izuku wouldn't want her to blame anyone, that if anyone was in need of saving, Izuku wouldn't even hesitate to put himself in harm's way after that she left, leaving a stunned Toshinori. And of course were his most frequent visitors, his classmates, and at the top were Momo and Uraraka, who spent any time they had in the hospital. It seemed as though he was already a heartthrob, Toshinori half-heartedly joked to himself. He thought about the accounts he had heard from the students when questioned about the incident. While most of them were separated at the beginning, it seemed Izuku had taken command of the remaining students and had them rescue the other students while he, Bakugo, and Todoroki assisted Aizawa. Then of course after Izuku proved his worth, things went downhill. The villain with the warping quirk, Kurogiri, he remembered, captured all of them. And was about to slaughter them before Izuku truly went beyond his limits. From what Izuku's friends had said, he was on his last legs from defending them along with Todoroki and Bakugo, but then he was suddenly covered in red lighting. He knew from that account that after all of his ether was depleted, Izuku had channeled pure Ofa throughout his body. Then he learnt that, after which he proceeded to decimate the villain who he heard was built from the ground up to destroy him. This of course had frozen the blood of all who heard it. It also served to increase the respect towards Izuku, with most of the pros leaving to get well cards, as well as keep an eye out for him. Toshinori had never been more proud at Izuku than he was right now, but truthfully, he wished none of this ever happened. He wished that the villains never attacked, he wished they didn't have decoy attacks on the city, so that their path to UA would be more time consuming. Most of all, he wished that Izuku was awake. He had never felt so much fear as to what he felt when he saw Izuku in such a state as he was in when they reached the USJ. Recovery Girl explained that Izuku had forcefully removed any instinctual barrier he had placed on his quirks, but this had caused his body to act only to subconscious commands. Of course he was only partially successful at this, but the fact that he once again blew them all away and saved the lives of his teachers and students filled him with pride. Nedzu himself asked to be notified when Izuku woke so that he could thank Izuku personally. He has proven himself in the eyes of so many people. The academy had given a few days off after the incident, but told the students to keep it under wraps so as to not incite panic in the public. But even after this, they had asked about Izuku's condition. Toshinori should not have been surprised. They said that even though Izuku was in his berserker state, the first thing he did was keep them safe with a barrier. He had truly surpassed anything Toshinori had hoped he would be. He was cut off from his thoughts when he saw movement at Izuku's bed. Izuku woke up to a white-tiled roof, the smell of disinfectant, and also the sight of his sensei looking at him through tears in shock and pride. He spoke only to find that his throat was parched beyond measure. Toshinori, sensing his discomfort, handed the boy some water which Izuku drank in large gulps. "Sensei, why are you here? And where are we?" Toshinori stared at Izuku, noticing that his eyes seemed to have a change in color, as his eyes were now a molten gold instead of the normal green. He shook himself and asked in a rather fatherly tone, which he will refuse to admit. Izuku, what's the last thing you can remember? Izuku blinked at the question and turned his head to the side before actually thinking about it. Well, we were going to the USJ and met the villains. Sensei, is everyone alright? The villain Namu. Before Izuku could short-circuit, Toshinori calmed him down and explained the situation as delicately as he could. After half an hour of explaining the story, as well as convincing him that everyone was alright, Izuku rested his head on his hands and let out a sigh. Thank God that's everyone is safe. Izuku, it was you who did that. You kept all the students safe, you were able to do a hero's work, you were able to reach out to everyone, your classmates look to you as a hero, you even have the respect of many pro-heroes. You have truly surpassed all my expectations, you've made me proud. Izuku's eyes shone with tears to think that he was able to do all that. He was so happy. The door opened and came in Recovery Girl who, as soon as saw Izuku awake, sighed a breath of relief before walking up to him with a grandmotherly smile before speaking. Izuku-chan, are you alright? Receiving a nod, she continued asking questions on how she felt before. Now, would you mind telling me what you were thinking when you put your body beyond safe limits? Izuku was suddenly aware of how menacing Recovery Girl could look when she wanted to. It's just that they looked scared and that they needed some help, you know. Recovery Girl gave him a look that said that this wasn't over. Well, let me explain what you did. You ripped out some of the restraints your body keeps so that you don't explode from all the power that's inside of you, and in doing so made some unexpected changes. It seems as though One for All had evolved so that you can use it better. It can now augment not only your physique, but now your ether. And there is a matter on what happened to your body when that happened. It seemed as though your body released so much potent energy that it literally burned your skin off. And due to your healing, you were literally in a cycle of causing damage to your body and healing it. This of course made problems. You were literally empty of energy. It was thanks to your classmates that there are no permanent damages. They lent me their stamina so that I could heal you. Now I recommend that you do not overexert yourself for the next few days, even though you physically in perfect condition. Also, your new eye color suits you. Izuku thanked the Recovery Girl who left to inform the principal. Was suddenly thinking about two things she said. First, he was alright only thanks to his classmates. This of course caused a warm feeling to envelop his heart. Second, what changes in eye color? He found out when he was handed a mirror by his sensei. Instead of the green eyes he was accustomed to, it was now a molten gold. He suddenly noticed the numerous get well soon cards on the desk, some from his classmates, and the rest were heroes. This of course caused him much happiness. The principal entered the room with Aizawa in tow. He clumsily bowed his head in respect, but the principal waved it off. Now, Midoriya-kun, I must admit you truly have a heart of gold. We saw your state after the incident and heard accounts of what happened. And you see, most of them were centered on you. In such a dangerous situation you were able to rise above the rest and take the bull by the horns. I dare say that if you weren't there, the villains would have won. And then there is one part of the entire thing that truly struck me. You see, at the end, even after you expended all your energy, the beast was able to overpower you. But then you did something incredible. You see, in the face of danger, you displayed the most important aspect of a hero. The principal stared into Izuku's eyes. Because what else defines a hero other than self-sacrifice? The principal walked to the door and turned before he bowed, shocking all three of them. So I thank you, Midoriya, for saving my students' lives even though you are one yourself. I hope you get well soon. The door closed, leaving the three people behind, stunned. Aizawa was the first to snap out of it. He coughed into his hand, grabbing their attention. Midoriya, Izuku, what you did was not only incredibly reckless. Izuku recoiled at Aizawa's tone before Aizawa sighed. But also very heroic. You saved not only the students' lives, but you saved mine. I was pretty sure that would have been my last fight, but you in the middle of the battle healed me to an extent that no one would believe unless they were there to see it. So, thank you, Izuku. I believe you have the most potential I have ever seen. With a nod to both of them, Aizawa left. Toshinori was giddy right now. Well then, Izuku, it seems you have earned Aizawa's respect. Congratulations. Now, you should get your rest. Classes start the day after, and I'm sure your mother would love to have you home tomorrow. 2 days later. Izuku sat in class surrounded by his classmates, who were asking so many questions at once that he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. He thought about the things that happened over the past 2 days. The moment he reached home, his mother hugged him so hard that he thought that she also had One for All, and then proceeded to bawl out and berate him for not thinking of his mother when he went and risked his life. Then a few hours later, around noon, he received calls from Iida, Momo, and Uraraka. While he was able to quell Iida's worries, it wasn't so simple to get the girls to believe him. And then he spent the next 2 hours hearing the girls scolding him through their tears, after which they demanded that they spend time together after school, which he agreed to, not wanting to incur their wrath again. Then, the moment he entered the academy he was the subject of many whispers, and then it was mayhem when he entered the class, as all of his classmates were waiting for him to enter. Which led to the current predicament. It was only when Iida came in and demanded that he not feel suffocated did Izuku finally get breathing space. After receiving a chorus of apologies, an awkward silence took place. Fumikage was the first to break it. "First of all, I guess this is common for all of us. Thank you for protecting us Midoriya, you two Todoroki, Bakugo. If you guys weren't there we would have been finished." Kirishima took the initiative and asked the next question. "Midoriya, what actually happened at the end? I mean, we were prepared to be the final line of defense against that thing, and then suddenly you go beast mode and send that guy flying away like the finishing move in a video game." The entire class nodded in agreement. Izuku broke out in sweat not knowing how to answer that question. But then he remembered that they were the reason that he was still alive, so he decided to tell them as much as he could without breaking his promise to All Might. At the end everyone was looking at him in awe. Well, Bakugo and Todoroki looked in respect, but the rest of them did. They heard the door open to show their homeroom teacher in all his glory. After a short speech on how proud he was of how each of them handled themselves, he went into business, which was the UA Sports Festival, which due to obvious reasons, was scheduled a month and a half later rather than at the end of this month, as planned. He went on to explain that they should take this opportunity to train as much as possible. "Should we really be having the sports festival? I mean, especially after that attack?" Mineta of course asked, scared out of his mind. The UA Sports Festival is crucial for anyone who plans to go pro, 1 chance a year and 3 chances in all. The eyes of the world will be on the UA and, as such, many will be watching you. This is the chance for you kids to get scouted by the pros. Momo further explained the importance of making an impact on the pros if they wanted to go above the level of sidekicks which most people won't qualify for. Now, class is dismissed. With that, the entire class started discussing their plans for the month, as well as the preparation for UA. Momo, Uraraka, and Iida were with Izuku planning on where they should go after school. Then, as soon as it was lunchtime, Izuku was hauled away by All Might to the teacher's lounge. "Sensei, why are we here?" A confused Midoriya asked Toshinori, who was preparing tea. "Izuku, the sports festival coming up will be your official debut to the world. You already have a name for yourself among the higher-ups. Your entrance scores were the highest we had in generations, and there is the fact that you were able to defeat that Namu guy. This will be your perfect launch pad to being the next symbol of peace." Toshinori stared at Izuku with determination. "The villains have realized that my time as the symbol of peace is coming to an end. Not today or tomorrow, but in the near future. That means you must be prepared to take up my mantle. You have already exceeded any expectations I had of you in the past months. You have all that it takes to be a better symbol than I ever could. And the sports festival is the prime opportunity to do so. Those who know of what you've accomplished will be watching you closely, including many of the elite." Izuku's eyes bulged out at the claim. "Every evening meet me where we used to train starting tonight. It's my goal to see that you are ready for the sports festival. And even beyond that, your main rivals will of course be young Bakugo and Todoroki." As class 1 packed to go home, they heard sounds of something akin to a mob beyond their door. They all stared at the door, curious. Izuku, having an idea on what was happening, opened the door, and like he expected, a large crowd was gathered, their phones out and eyes focused. Bakugo came to his side. "Get out of my way, extras," Bakugo shouted. "If you're hoping to scope out the competition, go somewhere else. You won't learn shit from us." The crowd grumbled, yet stayed still. While it's true that most of them came to get a look, a tall boy near the back said. He made his way forward. "You're humble for a kid in the hero course." Izuku, sensing the tension, decided to defuse the situation. "I'm sorry, but while it's strategic to scout the competition, you are blocking our way." "And who are you?" It was Kaminari who answered. "That's our class rep you're talking to." The other teen raised an eye. "Oh. So you're Midoriya Izuku, huh? You don't look like much." This of course sent the crowd into murmurs. Kirishima walked forward preparing to give him a smackdown before he was interrupted by Bakugo. "You should put your money where your mouth is." The teen scoffed before turning his back to them. "Well, I should say this, well, they were merely scouting the competition. I'm here to give you a declaration of war. So you better bring your A game to the festival." "Looks like the sports festival is going to be fun," Bakugo said. "If everyone's aiming for the top, then I'll just have to prove that I'm better than all of you." It had been a week since Izuku's training had begun for the UA Sports Festival. All Might had taken it upon himself to make sure he would be prepared for anything that he would face. He had also tested how much Izuku could do when pushed to the limits. The spar between them was one to see Izuku, while losing had made All Might work up a sweat until he decided to get serious and then proceeded to beat Izuku to the ground. While they were able to find out Izuku could control about 15% of One for All, which a staggering increase from the 5% he could a month back. They also found that Izuku had upped his body to handle the damage he endured almost regularly. He also began to work One for All into this magic, which seemed to act like an amplifier to what he could do. All Might had given him a day off since he said he had to meet up with someone who could teach Izuku better than he ever could. Of course, Izuku had argued saying that he was at the level he was only because of Toshinori. Which of course had made Toshinori proud that his students thought so much of him. And so we find Izuku, Momo, Uraraka and Iida at the local burger place. You know Izuku, I'm pretty sure you don't even have to train. You could fight us all off with one hand tied behind your back. Uraraka grumbled. Momo and Iida seemed to agree with her, which sent Izuku to chuckle a bit awkwardly. Yeah Izuku, I mean the only challenges you have are maybe Todoroki and Bakugo. Even then I'm pretty sure that you could still win. Momo said. Yes, I agree with Midoriya. You three are leagues above where we are. Iida added his 2 cents. Izuku sweat dropped at how they had placed him on such a big pedestal. He looked at the three who had become his best friends, with a nod he promised himself to make sure that he helped them as much as he could. You know guys, the reason I'm this strong is because I know the best ways to use my quirk and maximize my capabilities with it. Once he had their attention he turned to Iida. Iida, your quirk is engine which gives you super speed, so my advice is to develop a fighting style revolving around using your speed to overwhelm your opponent with your speed and by scoring well-timed hits, or a fighting style which uses your speed to evade all of your opponent's strikes and then when he is exhausted finish him off. And you could increase the damage of your strikes by timing the activation of your quirk so that your kicks would literally hit at unblockable speeds. Iida seemed stupefied that Izuku gave him such good advice, especially when this could be used against Izuku himself. Uraraka, your quirk is special, mostly because if your limit, which seems to be 3 tons, is crossed, you could potentially be able to lift anything. And I'd say that if you practice hand-to-hand combat along with increasing your speed so that you could touch someone faster to activate your quirk. There is also the fact that you could use the weightlessness of the objects like ammo to throw at your opponent. Speed will get you far, and I'm pretty sure that you're very flexible, so why not Parker? Uraraka listened in rapt attention to every word Izuku spoke and ended up blushing a bit at the end, which went unnoticed by the boys, but not by Momo who puffed her cheeks a bit. Momo, your quirk is much more complex than my quirk's construct aspect. You are pretty much capable of a lot of things. You rank just below me in the quirk apprehension test, which means you are pretty much perfect physically, and you are the smartest person in class. I'd recommend fighting with weapons, swords particularly dual wielding might suit you. I know that you are proficient with a bow staff too. The best thing you should do is push past your physical limits, practice reducing the time it takes for you to create anything, and my best advice for you is this. If you ever come across an opponent you can't beat, imagine a weapon that can. Keep that in mind, and I'm sure you'll do great. Momo noted every point Izuku told her, blushing whenever he complimented her, which of course only caught Uraraka's attention, as the boys continued to remain oblivious. It was only when Izuku finally finished did he notice the looks he was getting from his companions. Izuku sweated a bit as he saw their piercing gazes. Iida was the first to speak up. To think that you would be able to formulate such helpful advice for us without us even telling you about our training or quirks, and to deduce the best mode to progress our training. Truly Izuku, you are a great tactician and an even greater friend. At the end of his statement, Iida had tears coming out of his eyes. Momo and Uraraka simply looked at him with a blush and sputtered out their thanks. Izuku, oblivious to their dilemma, simply left it at that before telling them that they were friends and friends look out for each other. They then agreed that there would be no more talks of training for the rest of the day, and they will use this day to have fun before having to throw themselves into training. They finished their lunch before going to the arcade, where they challenged each other in games, where they found Iida to be great at dancing, and they also found Momo was as good a marksman as Izuku, and Uraraka having quite a good reflex too. They continued to go to places such as the park, simply enjoying the day without having any worries. Soon it was about to be nighttime, and time for them to depart. Iida left for his family's office, which was nearby. Momo said that she was getting picked up by her driver and suggested that she could drop them, which was politely declined by both Uraraka and Izuku. As the car came to the park entrance, Momo bid goodbye to both of them and walked a few steps before turning around, giving Izuku a hug and running to the car sputtering. Izuku was of course surprised by the gesture and thinking nothing of it hugged her back, and of course Uraraka was giving a death glare at the retreating car while gritting her teeth while cursing about having the first move taken from her. As they both walked in silence to Uraraka's house, halfway through Izuku asked her why she wanted to be a hero. She responded a bit shamefully that she wanted to be a hero so that she could get rich and let her parents lead an easy life, as she explained the situation to Izuku instead of a disapproving look she expected to receive. Izuku told her that her goal was noble no matter what anyone said, and that among all of them, he felt that she was the most grounded. They stood in front of her apartment with Izuku giving her a bright smile. Izuku was then subjected to another scenario where Uraraka hugged him and ran towards her home, yelling that she was happy that he believed in her. Training ground 2 weeks later. Two blurs were seen in the underground training ground at UA, engaged in close combat. Then suddenly the larger blur was bathed in gold and overpowered the smaller blur, that is until it suddenly vanished from view and appeared behind the golden one. A kick to the back of the larger one sent it flying towards the walls where it crashed into it. But before the smoke could settle there was a burst of red and gold before the blur was in front of a short old man wearing an old superhero costume. With another bout of combat, it was now he who was the one sent flying, but was back into the fight without even stopping. Toshinori watched on as his mentor duked it out with his student. While Izuku had the upper hand against his mentor physically, Gran Torino's quick thinking and experience gave Izuku a very hard time. He introduced them 2 weeks ago for the sole purpose of Izuku getting a challenge, as well as for him to gain experience with a sparring partner who wasn't All Might. It worked out pretty well. By Torino's prediction, Izuku should be able to reach 25% before the UA Sports Festival. There was one last collision, and Toshinori's old mentor was tossed back. Izuku stood in the middle of the ground, wearing a sleeveless version of his hero costume, archer's clothes from Fate minus the Shroud of Martin. He was breathing heavily and had a few bruises which were fast healing. He walked up to Gran Torino and initiated his healing abilities, his golden color eyes gaining a bit more shine in them. "You picked a good apprentice, Toshinori," Torino said, relishing the feeling of his non-aching back. "Fighting him is giving me a good chance to work these muscles, he's a genius at this. He also has an instinctual control over one for all now. Which is good, and not to mention his other quirk. Ever since that first beatdown I gave him, he's kept on improving." Izuku walked up to both of them, his eyes returning to their usual molten gold. While exhausted he had a smile on his face. "Sensei, how'd I do?" "You reminded me of myself, Izuku, but you are more capable than what I could ever do," Toshinori said. "You were able to give my sensei a run for his money, which means you should have a great chance in the festival. But your power won't help you if you get overconfident and underestimate your opponents. And not to mention that you have to keep an eye out for any villains that may attack you at your weakest," Gran Torino said. "I'd say you're ready right now, and there's still a week left, but keep the other mode as a last resort. While it does make you more powerful, the resemblance to your other transformation at the USJ would cause too many problems." "I agree," Toshinori said. "Keep to the moves you've remastered and your new ones, especially that air jump and speed skill. And most importantly, make sure you have fun. I'll make you proud, All Might," Izuku said, his eyes glowing with determination. "Well then, Izuku, I think it's time we made the finishing touches on your entire moveset and your fighting style, shouldn't we?" With that, Toshinori turned into his All Might form and jumped to the middle of the ground, getting Izuku to do the same. Izuku grinned as he closed his eyes, and the moment he opened them the color was now a bright gold filled with power. "Let's go wild, sensei." In a burst of magic he already covered half the distance between them, hand outstretched. Time skip night before festival. Izuku let out a sigh as he rested on the couch. He had been told to rest for the day so as to be at his best tomorrow. He had talked to his friends and they all gave him good news, as they said they had improved leaps and bounds compared to their level a month ago. They had also made a lot of breakthroughs that each promised would surprise him. Izuku had also told them that his training was fruitful as well. They had agreed to meet up at the stadium together so that they could have a familiar face to calm their nerves. Izuku thought the competition in the hero course was a mix of diverse and powerful quirks. In his research on the past UA festivals, it always followed the same structure. A qualifier, a team event, and then one-on-one fights. The qualifiers are basically an every man for himself event, which would mean that everyone would be put against each other. In the team event, he had already told his friends if they were willing to team up with him. This of course got Momo scolding him about how that they would always have Izuku's back. Iida and Uraraka agreed too, and the one-on-ones were pretty self-explanatory. Izuku stared at the ceiling, listening to some music so as to distract him from all the pressure. UA Stadium. A sports festival stadium, resembling the old Olympic Stadium in pretty much every detail, was built to house over 1,000 spectators. While the third-year competition is traditionally the most popular, the USJ attack had drawn the public's attention to the first-year competition. It has also caused an increase in security, including a higher number of pro heroes in attendance than usual. Izuku leaned back in his chair, watching his classmates trying to keep themselves busy. In fact, even his friends were a bit nervous. Their prep room had been well stocked with simple furniture and water bottles. He took a deep breath to calm himself. It wasn't rational to get worried now. He would have to prove himself in the festival. "Midoriya," Todoroki said. The heterochromatic boy stood in front of Izuku's chair. "I look forward to facing you in this tournament. You have proved that you are truly strong at the USJ. Well, I know it wasn't a conscious effort. The fact that you have that much power serves to showcase your chance at number 1. Isn't that right?" "I guess you're right. Most of us, including myself, are aiming for number 1. We'll settle it at the festival, won't we?" Izuku said, a grin on his face. Simply had a small smile. "Yay, I guess so." With it he left. Momo turned to Izuku. "He considers you a rival. Well, I should not be surprised." Izuku nodded, but before he could reply he heard the announcement for them to prepare for the entrance. Looking around he saw his classmates were still a bit overwhelmed by the pressure. Izuku walked up to the door and turned to the class, clapping to gain everyone's attention. "I'm not really sure what to say in this situation, but I feel as though I should tell you this: the festival, while important, isn't worth getting anxious over. The most important thing about the festival is to have fun. You shouldn't have to think that there is a guillotine over your head. Just do your best, guys, don't sweat the small stuff." Izuku saw that his classmates looked a bit better than before. Well, not at a 100%, it was enough. Soon enough, Class 1 was led to the northernmost gate onto the stadium's floor. They listened to President Mick's welcoming speech until he said, "And now the athletes. First, this festival's favorites. The students who fought off a villain attack on the USJ with incredible power, from heroic course, Class A. They emerged from the gate and stepped out onto the grass field. Izuku in front of his class, head held up high. He looked to where the pros were sitting and stared determinedly. Following them is heroic course Class B, and then classes C, D, and E from general studies. Classes F, G, and H from the support course. And of course, the business courses. I, J, and K. President Mick finished as the students congregated on the stadium grounds. A stage rose from the ground and a female hero dressed in leather and latex walked on. "We're going to begin with the athletes of Midnight," the R-rated hero shouted. "Your student representative is Midoriya Izuku of Class 1A. Izuku walked up to the platform and stood in front of the Mick. The sports festival is an event designed for the next generation to prove that they are strong enough to carry on the legacy left behind by their predecessors. It is a chance for us to prove that we are capable of carrying the torch passed on each generation and to lead us to a better future. And now on this stage, all of us here have no barriers, whether they be from the hero course, the general, or support or business. The fact is we are here to prove ourselves, and we will give our best." But that Izuku walked away from the Mick after giving a bow to the crowd. He was greeted by smiles from the students of all courses. "Well, now that's over," Midnight said, voice filled with pride. "Let's get going. The first event is the qualifier where dreams are crushed and many of you will be sent home crying. This year's event is," she pointed at the large screen, which flashed and showed obstacle course. "The first preliminary event is an obstacle race between all 11 first-year classes through a nearly 4 kilometers long course around the stadium. Aside from leaving the course, participants were allowed to do anything. The first 42 students to finish the race will earn the right to advance and participate in the next event. So best of luck, kids." Izuku watched as everyone stood in formation at the gate of the stadium. The first test was designed to weed out the competition by pitting themselves against each other. Izuku looked at the narrow pathway and suddenly it hit him. Ignoring the whistle, Izuku ran back and let the others pass him, which caused some commotion in the audience, especially among the pros. Izuku then focused the max amount of one for all he could control into a single jump. Golden lightning seemed to erupt from his body and taking everyone by surprise, he reached 3/4 of the entire wall and then shot a chain which he pulled to propel him to the top. He looked to see ice creeping up from the door, knowing that Todoroki must have the competition. Izuku once again used one for all to pass the crowd and even past Todoroki. At the commenters box. "Aizawa. What the hell have you been feeding that kid?" President Mick screamed. Aizawa simply gave a smirk and replied. "Midoriya Izuku is one unique character. He was the first in the entrance exam and also played a huge part in the USJ, along with Todoroki and Bakugo. I wouldn't be surprised if they completely blew us away with their skills." His voice was laced with pride. "Of Todoroki." As Todoroki looked up and saw a green-yellow blur pass him, he knew that it was Izuku, deciding to kick it up a notch, but before he could he saw movement far up ahead, and at the edge of his vision, he saw huge robots blocking the way. He also noticed that Izuku had slowed as well, taking his chance he used his quirk to boost him forward. Icicle Road. Ice shot from his feet, giving him a boost that only left him a few meters behind Izuku, while simultaneously slowing the competition down. As Izuku stared down the robots, he knew that he'd have to finish them to keep his lead. He raised his arm much like he was throwing a spear and shouted, "Battle Arts, Heavenly Spear." A bright spear formed in his arm and, as it was thrown and struck the robot, a violent explosion rocked the area. Todoroki on the other hand formed a tidal wave of ice to destroy the robots. This led to the robots to be frozen unbalanced, causing it to topple over the other athletes, while many evaded it, mostly from the hero course. Those in the general studies classes were unable to, and just when the robot was about to crash on them. Battle Arts, Holy Smite. An eruption of gold energy destroyed the robot into pieces which harmlessly flew to the sides. They turned to see Izuku with a palm outstretched, and the students gave him a sincere smile. Commenter box. Wow, that Todoroki kid sure packs a punch to be able to freeze so many robots at once, and that too without an effort. Although he should be mindful of the collateral damage he may cause. But then again, Izuku shines again, rescuing the students from injury. Aizawa simply scared. Todoroki is fighting to win, he is on a different level than most. Which is why he is gunning for first. And it seems Midoriya has dropped to 10th place, with most of those who passed being from the hero course. Let's see what he'll do next. With Izuku. Izuku tried to lose his lead, but his hero complex, lol, refused to let him leave them helpless. He saw that Todoroki was about to begin the rope stage. Izuku decided to bust some moves. Izuku focused either to his souls and burst past two people ahead of him. The moment his feet touched the ground, he used another burst to propel him forward onto the edge of the rope, putting him in 5th place. He saw that Todoroki and Bakugo were head to head, but seemed intent on sabotaging each other while trying to evade the mines. With barely a kilometer between them and 1st place, Izuku knew he'd have to do something drastic. Flooding his legs with Ofa, he ran to the minefield, and a few feet from the minefield, he used either to give him a major boost, putting him in the air past both Todoroki and Bakugo, who saw the threat and stopped trying to sabotage each other. Izuku, knowing that they would overtake him easily, decided to seal that chance off. He aimed his hand at the ground a few feet away from both of them and said, "Battle Arts, Sword Barrage." Multiple swords struck the area in front of Bakugo and Todoroki, blocking their progress. Izuku, seeing his chance, shot a chain at one of trees outside of the minefield and pulled himself, channeling his magic. With just a 100 meters between him and victory, Izuku ran with his body augmented by his magic. Todoroki and Bakugo boosted their speed to catch up to him, but it was all for naught as Izuku claimed 1st place. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.